Men of Reddit who proposed and she said no. What happened afterwards with your life? Story 1. We were living together. I asked. She said, "No, I love you, but I need to think about it. I don't think I'm ready yet. Can you give me some time and ask later?" A few months go by. I ask again. Same response. A few more months, same deal. A couple more weeks, and then she says, "Hey, what do you think of us getting married?" I replied, "That's an excellent idea. Why didn't I think of that?" Our 39th anniversary is next month. We now have a Discord. Check out the server in the link in the description. Story 2. Background. My mom joined the army after graduation from high school in 1983, got sent to basic and eventually ended up at Fort Stewart. As my mom describes, the barracks sucked and she didn't want to live there. The only way to live off base was to 1. Get approval from the CO, which was very uncommon, or 2. Be married. So my mom's then boyfriend, Ted, liked the idea. They took a quick trip to SC to get married because there was a 2-week wait in Georgia because you needed to have a blood test done. Then they found a house and settled in. A year into married life and Ted is getting ready to leave, and both had decided months before that the relationship wasn't good anymore. So my mom brought a bottle of cheap champagne and divorce papers to the house on their 1-year anniversary, 1986. My father joined the Army Intelligence, married a woman, Stacy, that he thought he loved, that his family approved of, Jewish. Got sent to New Mexico, found out he didn't like that so much and hopped into the Army medic system. He got transferred to South Korea for a year, 1983, and it took him 4 months to save up to bring Stacy over to live where he was in South Korea. But, surprise, Stacy had been unfaithful since the beginning. Dad drops Stacy quickly and gets transferred to Fort Stewart in 85. Now, in 86, my mom is newly divorced and has just gotten orders to report back to the barracks within the week. Since Ted, now ex-husband, had already left, my mom decides to go out with a bang. Hosts a house selling party and invites her friends and friends of friends. My dad was a friend of a friend and shows up to have fun. Everyone's getting drunk. And as my mom describes the event, as my mom is coming back from the bathroom, my father attempts to have a conversation that went roughly like this. "This is a great house. It's a shame you have to sell. Got any offers?" "No." "Hey, wanna marry me and we can keep living here?" My mom thought he was joking because he was stupid drunk, but the next morning he was still adamant. And my mom agreed to the idea with the stipulation that either one of them could walk at any time. Mom says she fell in love with the idiot about 3 months after they got married. They're having their 35th wedding anniversary this year. Does this really follow the prompt? I don't think anyone in this story said no. But still, cute story and pretty funny. Story 3. It was really bad for a while. Then it was just really bad. Then it became really bad. Then it became bad. Then it was just blah. Then it was neutral. And then things started to get better. They continued to get better by me learning to be happy and me doing me things. I eventually found someone else and things have been getting better for 20 years now. Story 4. She said yes as I had a special occasion planned. One of those observation wheels, and I proposed at the very top. And we were on our way to a family event and I had a ring made and everything. Then a few days later, she said no. Everything fell apart. I was distraught. We continued dating for a while, but it was long distance, other side of the world. When I visited, it would just be super awkward. Eventually, her dad kicked me out. Was flying standby and was stuck in an airport for 4 days. Took me years to recover. Now I am happily married and am glad it never worked out between us. I was not in a good place when I met her, and her family was super controlling. It just never would have worked. The woman I married is super cool and is my best friend. Turned out better than expected. Story 5. Very first girlfriend ever. Started dating at 17. After 6 years of dating, I proposed. She said, "No, I'm sorry." And I asked why. She said, "I've been thinking about this for a while, but didn't want to talk to you about it. I found someone else." Then she broke up with me right then and there. I asked if she cheated and she said no. "We're just friends right now, but he makes me happy when I'm with him and you just don't. You used to, but not anymore." I tried sabotaging their relationship when I found him begging her for nudes. Tattled to her ultra-Christian parents that he was twice her age, which he is, and did everything I could to be the insane one. Finally realized what I was doing, apologized, promised to never talk to her or her family again. I sold the ring and used the money to buy a guitar and a boatload of weed and spiraled out of control for 3 years. Flunked all my classes, got a dead-end job at a construction gig, slowly descended into borderline alcoholism, couldn't leave the house or go to work or do my job without being high. Gained a ton of weight, let myself go, finally contemplated self-unalive. I even planned it out with a 20-page instruction manual on how to make it painless, not screw it up, and not hurt anyone in the process. Never went through with it because I kept getting scared. And spending my unaliving fund on weed and alcohol. Finally broke down and told my parents all of this, asked for help. Spent a year in a rehab program with a therapist. Got out and have been clean for 3 years by this September and still wake up at 3 a.m. feeling sick every couple of months for the way I treated her, all after having spent 6 years telling her that I loved her. But that's all over. Now all I can do is learn from it, promise to be better, and keep going. So now I'm turning 29 in a week, still living at home with parents and constantly battling self-loathing and anxiety while working a job for $9.25 an hour. But I pay my parents $300 a month to stay with them and I'm going back to school, taking the minimum number of credit hours per semester since I'm paying for it out of pocket and I work full-time, and overtime when I can get it. But slowly dragged my GPA from a 1.28 to a 2.64, and can start getting help next semester instead of paying for it all out of pocket. I also lost a ton of weight during the pandemic, and weigh just 189 now. In rehab, I dropped to 220, but I was closer to 245 to 250 before that. Safe to say I won't be worth dating for a long time, but maybe when I get my degree under my belt and finish growing and learning, I can get a self-sustaining job, and then I can move out and truly start over. How does something sneak up on you like that when you're going to propose to someone? Isn't like the number one rule, talk to them beforehand about marriage? Because if they're telling you in the moment you're proposing that, oh, I found someone else, it seems like you didn't talk about it at all. Still, OP, that super sucks, and I'm glad that he's getting his life back on track. Story 6. This is the story of my parents. My dad asked my mom to marry him several times. She said no several times. One day, my dad asked my mom to marry him yet again. She said yes. He freaked out and left her apartment and dumped her. 3 weeks later, he hated his life without her and begged her to take him back and marry him. They were married 9 months later for 16 years, until my mom passed away from cancer. They loved each other so much and had such a deep appreciation for each other. That was 25 years ago. My dad has not remarried. No one will even come close to my mama. Story 7. My mom rejected my father the first 2 times. There was no real hard feelings between them. I guess my mother was just not ready for marriage yet. She ended up proposing to him. My grandmother and mother sewed a suit for their dog to wear and attached a sign around its neck with a ring that read, "Will you marry me?" She then sent the dog out into the kitchen to beg for scraps while my father was preparing dinner. The next thing she heard was a very concerned voice shouting, "Honey, the dog is asking me to marry him." Cue absolute hysterics. My dad said yes to the proposal. My human dad and human mom are still married 2 decades later. The fact that I even had to clarify this is disappointing. Story 8. My dad proposed to a woman who said no. My dad was a violent alcoholic, and she said she couldn't be with him unless he got clean. Took him a while, but he did it. He wound up meeting my mom through a matchmaker, and they've been married for 25 years. If that woman never said no to him, he never would have gotten clean. It was the lowest point in his life, but it all brought him to my mom, who makes him happier than ever. My dad still talks to her sometimes. She got married to someone else, and they had a son who died from a medical condition. Now, OP, sneaking that in at the end was just mean. You didn't need to say that. Why'd you say that? That's so sad. Story 9. My mom actually said no to my dad's proposal when they were younger. Not because they weren't in love, but because she wasn't sure if it was something she actually wanted to do. Rather than something that society expected of her or whatever, they still stayed together and had kids, hence why you're reading this now. And then when my dad was terminally ill a few years ago, my mom plucked up the courage and asked him. Just to get her back after all those years, he said no, before taking her up on the offer a few days later. He died a happy man. Story 10. I was a young Marine. I was only home during the weekends, was dating this girl for about a year from my hometown. When I asked, she said yes. Her dad, former Navy, kept saying we should wait. We put it off for a bit longer. Fast forward another year, she dumped me. Father informs me she has been sleeping with a lot of guys, like more than 50 over the 2 years we dated, and was very happy I didn't marry her and apologizes to me for her behavior. She then totally ghosts everyone, including her family, for about 6 months. Find out she moved 7 hours away and was living under a house. Not a basement, under a house with her new boyfriend. She calls her mom to come get her. Mother and father ask me to go get her and bring her home. Good times. Good times. Story 11. Not sure if this counts, but I proposed. She said yes, but 1 month before the wedding, she took it back. This is what happened immediately with my life. I personally lost about $3,000 worth of deposits. My parents and her parents lost about $4,000 each on deposits. Me and my parents are working class, so it took years for us to financially recover from this. I spent $2,200 on a ring I didn't want. My biggest regret, and will say this to anyone who listens, the engagement ring chain I bought it from wouldn't take it back. I took it to pawn shops and they'd only offer a few hundred. This engagement ring store bank on customers who want the whole ring, stone band setting. If you're going to buy a ring, just buy the stone and a gold band. Setting, you can get a better deal from a local jewelry store. Apparently, my gem I bought was crap. Most of the cost of the ring was BS. Most of my family was from out of state, and a lot of people were pissed because they canceled their flight. And I had to go to the ER, so I couldn't leave my room. I couldn't take any calls because everyone was pissed and I didn't want to hear it. I was depressed and just stayed in bed. One day, my roommate grabbed me and took me to the ER where the doctor treated me for severe dehydration and an infection. What happened when I got over it? I became stronger for it. I didn't propose to anyone until a decade later. Honestly, there wasn't anyone that I loved deeply enough to be in a committed relationship. But when I proposed, I was in my 30s. Our relationship was more mature than my first time I proposed. We're now married for 13 years. She's my best friend. When I have good news, she's the first person I want to tell it to. When I have bad news, she's also the first person I want to tell it to. I have also financially recovered. I learned my lesson about the engagement ring. Only paid $300 for it. She loved it and treasures it. After our 10-year milestone, we were doing so well, I told her to pick a wedding ring of any cost. She refused. She still wears that cheap $300 ring and loves it. Story 13. I spoke to her about it beforehand, and she seemed really keen on the idea. So I decided to propose about a week after in front of all of our friends. She was so shocked that she picked me up off my knee and shooed me away. Most of our friends were confused because everyone knew it was going to happen, and she had said that she was excited for it. I didn't know what to do. It was all really embarrassing, and later she explained that she didn't mean no, she just didn't know what to say and was scared. She said yes after apologizing profusely. And just this year, we celebrated our 9th anniversary. Yeah, there's some people out there that just don't handle the pressure well, fair enough. I'm glad it all worked out in the end. Story 13. In 2017, Google came up with this idea to allow you to make photo books out of your Google Photos account. My girlfriend and I had been dating for almost 2 years, and I knew that she was the one I wanted to marry. So I created this wonderful photo book of all of our selfies together and ended it with a page made out of a photo I generated that said, "Will you marry me?" I then decided to put all these things into an album and build the photo book. What didn't occur to me at the time was that the album I put these in was a shared album, and the other person gets a notification when you add new photos to it. And the other person that album was shared with? My girlfriend. That evening, we had dinner and it all came out. She saw the photo, she wasn't ready. There were a few reasons why, but they were good reasons and smart reasons mostly to do with timing, family, and finances. We weren't breaking up, we just weren't getting engaged at that time. A year later, we have fully discussed the concept of getting married. We went ring shopping, she picked out her own ring, and by the time I actually did propose, we both knew what her answer would be. We celebrated our first wedding anniversary in April. It seems to have worked out so far, and the photo book is on a shelf to my left as we speak. Google really did OP a solid here. It forced him to have that discussion before proposing, and it made things go a lot better, it seems. Story 14. We received a letter from the immigration office saying that she was lacking some documents. At the moment, we were both stressed with work and study, and none of us were sufficiently fluent in German to decipher this kind of language. We went to the university office for foreign students. The lady in charge translated to us the letter badly, telling us that even presenting the documents, they would proceed with the deportation process. We panicked. Looking for some more help, we ended up in City Hall. With the adrenaline rush, I proposed to her in quite a loud voice. "If we get married, could we stop the deportation?" I asked to the poor guy in the information office. I can't remember if he gave us an answer. "I want to marry her. Will you marry me?" She started laughing. I started laughing. The guy in the office gave us the telephone to the pertinent department and asked us to call. We went out of the city hall and we couldn't stop laughing. She said to me, "Well, thank you, but let's wait a bit." After the weekend, we went to immigration office and the people there explained which documents were missing and how to get them. She wasn't denied the visa and we kept living in the way we planned. It was intense and, in retrospect, really funny. Addendum. We are not married and never planned, but we live together. She got a job that provides her with a visa. Soon she will present herself to a citizenship exam. Story 15. My friend A had been with his girlfriend B for years, so he decided that he wanted to propose. What he didn't know is that B was also thinking about proposing to him. A proposed first, and B freaked out because she had already set her proposal and bought a ring. So she said no. Over the next week, B freaked out more and refused to answer A's calls and messages. A then decided to use the money he had saved up to buy a plane ticket to Europe. What was supposed to be a 3-month trip through Western Europe turned out to be a year-long trip around the world. One day, A says that he's coming back, and B decides to go and wait for him at the airport and propose to him there. It turns out that while being in Peru, A met a girl and they fell in love almost immediately and got married in Peru. 5 years later, A and his Peruvian wife are still happily married and recently had a baby, while B still hasn't quite forgiven herself for ruining her relationship with A. Yeah, that is the risk you run when you say no to a proposal, huh? That wasn't the play. Story 16. Not my story, but someone I'm friends with. They both had crappy homes and became a couple at 14. Somewhere around 20, he proposed to her. She said she wasn't ready to commit yet. After that, he'd propose to her every year, partially in hopes that she would be ready, but it was also kind of a ritual, where he would show her that he's still serious. She would say no every time. In their late 20s, he was done with his studies. She could see the finish line, and so she told him that she's ready, meaning marriage and eventually children. That's when he gets second thoughts about marrying the only woman he ever had a relationship with, and he wasn't sure if he was making a mistake. They went on a break. She went to the US from Europe to do her PhD at MIT. They drifted apart more. She moved on and found a new long-term relationship with a partner that's a lot better for her. While he quickly regretted ending the relationship and started banging whoever he could find on Tinder without being able to form a meaningful relationship after. Story 17. We'd been dating for a year and a half, and I was due to move out on orders, was in the army. She suggests we get married. I said, no way. I was going off to school, army type, for 6 months. Then a year on deployment to the Middle East. It just wouldn't work. She was calm and then said, you think I'll be a burden to all that, but I'll actually be a help. While just seconds earlier, all I could think of was what a pain in the butt it would be to have to get married and then leave, and now it, for whatever reason, seemed perfectly reasonable that she was right. We got married a week later at the courthouse. I was 22. Last month, we had a nice, socially distant dinner party for our 29th anniversary with our 2 amazing kids and a few friends. Story 18. About 2 years later, I met my wife of 22 years. We are happily married. The one who said no got married for the first time last year and seems happy. My wife is way into me in ways that the former girlfriend never was, and I see my life as far happier with my wife than I ever was with the one who said no. She's not a bad person. I was just young and in love with someone who wasn't in love with me. It worked out for the best. I'm glad she said no.